The sound of the garage door opening caused my heart to pound faster than it should have. It was late. It is too late for Jessica to return home from her so-called work event. I stood in the dim light of the kitchen, appearing to be preoccupied with my phone, but every muscle in my body was wired to wait. Her car door closed outside, and my footsteps filled the driveway. The front door creaked open, and there she was. Jessica hardly looked at me as she threw her purse on the counter. She smelled like booze, like perfume that was not hers, like something different, something I didn't recognize but already despised. "Are you up?" she asked. Her speech was light and easygoing, as if she hadn't just walked in at 1:37 a.m. on a Tuesday. I forced a smile. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." She hummed, an acknowledgement already scrolling across her phone. Fingers moved too quickly. I watched her examine the details. The little smudge of lipstick on the corner of her mouth. The fact that her shirt was not tucked in like it had been when she left. If she hadn't met my gaze a month ago, I would have convinced myself that I was hallucinating. But not anymore. Not after the messages I discovered. I had been an idiot for ignoring the warning signs and dismissing them as stress or coincidence. But 3 days ago, when she left her laptop open, I noticed a notification in the corner of the screen, a preview of a message titled, "I can still taste you." I did not need to see the name. I did not need to see anything else. My stomach had twisted into such a tight knot that I feared I'd throw up. I clicked the message to access the conversation, and there it was. Weeks knows. Months of letters, photographs, plans, and hotel reservations. I should have challenged her right away, should have tossed the laptop across the room and demanded the truth. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was because she still kissed me that morning before work, acting as if everything were fine. Perhaps it was the way she continued to refer to me as baby. It was as if she hadn't been on her knees for someone else the night before. No, I was not about to explode, not yet. Not until I understood everything. So I acted dumb, acted normally, waited, and tonight was the last nail in the coffin. Jessica was texting again, her lips barely containing a smirk. I leaned against the counter and pretended to yawn. Long night. She shrugged and slipped off her heels. Yeah, just some dull labor. I let that settle between us for a second. Allow the untruth to rot in the air. Then I smiled. That is funny. Her fingers had ceased moving. What? I gestured vaguely. It's simply funny because I was speaking with Mark today. Jessica blinked. Mark? Yeah, your employer. Her whole body stiffened. It was subtle, but it attracted my attention. I angled my head, studying her reaction like a hunter observing its prey. He stated that the event finished at 10. Jessica opened her lips slightly before covering them with a scarf. Oh, yes, a few of us stayed out for drinks afterwards. Oh, yes. Where? She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Too long. She was about to lie, and I was going to love it. Jessica's hesitancy was fleeting, but I caught it. A flash of panic in her eyes before she put on that well-practiced smirk. Oh, you wouldn't know it, she remarked with a dismissive gesture. Just a bar downtown. Try me, I replied, keeping my tone casual and curious, as if I truly believed her. She uttered an exaggerated sigh. She rolled her eyes. God, Liam, why are you grilling me? It was only drinks. You don't care when you go out with your friends. It was her game. Turn things around on me. Make me the bad person. Classic. Jessica. I did not bite, I just smiled. I am simply interested, sweetheart. Which bar? She opened her mouth and then closed it. I could almost see her head scrambling. She knew if she had named a location. I check. If she stated she couldn't remember, it had sounded ludicrous. She was imprisoned, and she knew it. The smirk quickly reappeared. The switch switched. Jesus, you've been acting weird lately. She giggled and shook her head. Are you insecure or something? Insecure, right? Because I was the issue here. I feigned a chuckle, stroking the back of my neck as if I were ashamed. Were eggs used? I do not know. Sometimes I get worried. Hook. Jessica's expression softened immediately, becoming almost pitying. She moved closer, throwing her arms around my neck and squeezing her body against mine. "Oh, baby," she muttered and ran her fingers through my hair. "You don't need to worry. You are the only one for me." I nearly laughed in her face. Instead, I let her kiss me, press her lips against mine slowly and sweetly, like if she weren't texting another man, as if she hadn't spent the previous couple hours with him, as if I hadn't already witnessed the proof. I kissed her back deeply and passionately. She had no idea. I already knew everything, and she had no idea what would happen next. The next morning, I was awake before Jessica. I watched her sleep for a time, tangled in the blankets, as if she hadn't just lied to my face a few hours before, or kissed me with the taste of another man lingering on her lips. I could have challenged her right there. I could have shook her awake and tossed her phone at her, demanding the truth she'd never willingly tell me. But it wasn't enough. I did not want her to admit it. I wanted her to drown in it. So I got up softly. I took care not to wake her and went downstairs. My plan was already in action. I spent the morning making calls and setting things up. First, I validated the hotel reservation I had discovered in her texts. She and her mystery partner had been using it for several months, a nice property close outside the city with a fictitious name. I had the reservation information, receipts, and even the room service costs. I then checked the AirTag. I had slipped into her car last night. The entire location history was available. She had not been to any downtown bars. She had gone directly from her work function to a residential location that I didn't recognize when I was preparing to make a visit. By the time Jessica arrived downstairs, I was at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and checking my phone as if nothing was wrong. She yawned and stretched in her oversized sleep shirt. I used to adore seeing her in it, but now it makes my stomach turn. Morning. She murmured and walked straight to the refrigerator. Morning. I responded, glanced up just in time to see her unlock her phone and swipe away a notice. I smiled. Who's texting this early? She froze for a half second. Without looking at me, she shrugged. It's just Emma. She is arranging another girls' night. Emma was her go-to pal for an excuse. The friend who, ironically, had no idea she was being utilized as a cover. Nice. I said, "Tell her I said hello." Jessica flashed me a tight smile and returned to the fridge, but I caught up. She tightened her grip on her phone. She was nervous. Good. I let the stillness linger, letting her believe she was getting away with it. Then, while she was pouring herself a drink of juice, I casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, I'm going out for a bit today. I thought I'd stop by Mark's workplace. You forgot your scarf there the other night." The glass nearly fell from her grasp. She recovered fast. Laughing. "What?" "No, I did not." I grinned and drank another sip of coffee. "Yeah, you did. I phoned Mark this morning. He claimed he found it after the occurrence." Jessica blinked. "That is bizarre. I do not recall leaving it there." I shrugged. "I guess I'll grab it for you." She nodded slowly, but I could see it now. Gears turning in her head, dread setting in because we both knew she had never left a scarf at Mark's office, and if I was going there, I wasn't going for it. I stood up and grabbed my keys. "I will see you later." And then I walked out the door, leaving her standing there, holding her breath. She had no idea where I was going, and she was about to find out. Except for the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, the ride across town was peaceful. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was overly simple. It's too easy. No, I sensed precision. A precise, calculated focus. Jessica believed she had everything under control. She thought she could lie to my face, kiss me goodnight, and sneak away to another man's bed without consequences. She had no notion that by the end of today, her entire world would collapse. I drove up to the address on the AirTags. History: a nice-looking house in a clean, quiet suburban neighborhood. The type of place where families lived. A place where a man like him should not be sneaking around with another person's wife. I turned off the engine and sat for a time, watching the home. It was just after midday. Jessica's lover was at home. I knew this since I had previously conducted my research. Ethan Carter was a 35-year-old gym owner, tall and built, divorced. He probably screwed someone else's wife back then. 2. He wasn't some casual fling. He was the pattern. I got out of my car and walked up to the front door, knocking twice. A few seconds later, the door opened, revealing Ethan Carter, dressed in gray sweatpants and a fitting t-shirt, as if he had just finished a workout. His expression changed the moment he spotted me. Surprise, then perplexity, followed by something else. Recognition. I smiled. "Hey, Ethan." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Do I know you?" "You should," I replied, tilting my head. "You have been. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Angie, my wife." I wish I could have captured his expression at that precise time, the way the blood drained out of it. His lips opened slightly, searching for words he didn't have. "I save it." I intervened, moving forward and forcing him back inside his own home. "We both understand what has been going on. I don't need a half-assed excuse." Ethan blinked quickly, shook his head, and scoffed. "Look, man, I'm not sure what you believe is going on, but you don't know." I took my phone from my pocket, tapped it a few times, and then turned the screen towards him. The communications, hotel receipts, and photographs. Jessica is half-dressed on his bed, smiling for the camera like a lovesick teen. Ethan's whole body stiffened. His gaze flickered to the television before returning to me, his jaw clenching. "An asterisk? T?" "Yeah," I replied, placing my phone back into my pocket as she asked. He simply stood there, rubbing a palm over his face and breathing sharply. Then, to no surprise, he began with the usual crap. "Look, I didn't realize she was married at first. Okay, she informed me you were separated and that she was upset that she would be leaving you shortly." I laughed, really laughed. "That is cute. You think I give a damn about your excuses?" Ethan's nostrils flared. His posture shifted slightly, shoulder squaring, chest puffing, as if he expected us to get into a fight. Pathetic. I came closer, my voice low. "I do not need you to say anything, Ethan. I just wanted to watch your reaction when you discovered you'd been played as much as I had." He paused. "What?" I smiled. "Jessica lies to everyone. Did you honestly think you were special? That she wasn't conveying the same message to me when in your bed?" Ethan said nothing. His jaw moved as if he wanted to disagree, but deep down he knew I was correct. I let it sink in. Then I clapped his shoulder. Friendly-like. "Anyway, I felt you should know what kind of woman you're dealing with." I turned toward the door and halted before returning my gaze to him. "Oh, and will you do me a favor?" He tightened. "What?" "Make sure Jessica answers the phone when I contact her in 10 minutes. Then I walked away and my plan progressed to phase 2. I drove home with a peculiar calm, like if a storm was approaching. But I was in control of the wind. Jess had no idea. I had just been face to face with her lover. Ethan had no idea what she was until now, an opportunistic liar who told us whatever suited her. And now it was time for her to experience it. I parked in the driveway and slowly walked up to the house. The door was unlocked. Jessica was sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand, her eyes flickering up the moment I walked in. She was anxious. I could see it in her tight stance and the way her fingers jerked on the screen. She forced a smile. "Hello, babe. How was your day?" I closed the door behind me. "Interesting." Her smile faltered briefly. Then she tilted her head, playful. "Oh, yes. What have you done?" I slowly walked forward, keeping a close eye on her. I ran some errands. Meet a new friend. Jessica's lips parted slightly. Oh, I nodded and kept my expression bland. Yeah. His name is Ethan. That was it. That was the moment. Her face scarcely changed, but I noticed everything. Her throat bobbed in a little frightened swallow, and her grip on her phone tightened briefly. Her pupils widened before she controlled her face. She blinked at me, puzzled. Ethan. I don't believe I know one. I laughed low and sharply. Jessica. Her mouth slammed shut. I strolled up to the armchair across from her and sat down cautiously. I know everything. Please maintain silence. Suffocating. Then she did exactly what I expected. Jessica recovered. She tilted her head and narrowed her eyes as if I was being foolish. Liam, what exactly are you talking about? I breathed and pulled out my phone, swiped to the photographs and turned the screen toward her. This, I replied simply. Jessica's face remained totally still. There's no gasp. There is no suddenness. There is no guilt. After a slow blink, she slumped back against the couch and moaned, rubbing her temples. Jesus and Leah. I waited. She looked up at me, irritation on her face. Why would you go through my things? I grinned and shook my head. That is the first thing you say. I can't explain. Not, it isn't as it seems. So why were you looking? She scoffed. Because it's weird and pitiful. I gave out a low laugh. Right? I am the pathetic one. Jessica folded her arms and exhaled sharply. Liam, let's be honest. This marriage has been over for a time. I raised a dead brow. Funny. You didn't appear to believe it was dead last night when you kissed me and told me I was the only one for you. Something flashed before her eyes. Annoyance, not regret. I was attempting to spare your feelings. I chuckled again and shook my head. Jessica, I don't need you to spare anything. You've already demonstrated the type of person you are. She rolled her eyes and stood up. Oh God, stop being so theatrical. Dramatic, dramatic. I pushed myself to stay seated and maintain a calm expression, but my hands were wanting to tear this entire place apart. I took a slow breath. Then I inquired nonchalantly, How long? Jessica paused. I bent forward and rested my elbows on my knees. How long? She crossed her arms and adjusted her weight slightly. Several weeks. I smiled. Try 8 months. Her mouth slammed shut. I brought up another screenshot, hotel reservations, dates, locations. I tilted my head. Perhaps your memory isn't as good as you thought. Jessica remained silent for a long time before, to my full amazement, saying something. She sighs and shrugs. Okay, fine, 8 months. So what? My fingers tightened into fists. So what? I repeated with a dangerously calm voice. Jessica breathed and shifted as if she were bored. You act like this is a massive betrayal, Liam. But let's be honest, you were never enough for me. So there it was. The knife, the final twist. I should have exploded, should have screamed and hurled something, made her realize what she'd done. But I did not. I smiled, because Jessica had no idea she had just given me everything I needed to harm her. Jessica stood there, arms crossed, chin high as if she had accomplished something, as if her words hadn't just gone through me like a dull blade. You were never enough for me. I stared at her, allowing the words to linger in the air, making her believe she had the upper hand and marinating in her own arrogance. Then I exhaled slowly and steadily, leaning back in my chair. All right. Jessica frowned slightly. What? I nodded, stroking my jaw as if I were seriously considering it. You're correct. That took her off guard. I noticed the flash of hesitancy in her expression, the fleeting second of, wait. What? Before she smoothed it out. But I wasn't done. If that's how you feel, Jessica, I said calmly. Easy. Controlled. So I guess there's no point in dragging this out. I reached into the side table drawer, took out the folder I had prepared days before, and put it on the coffee table between us. Jessica stared at it. Her confidence slipped just a little. "What is this?" she inquired, her voice slightly tighter. I gestured lazily. "Open it." She hesitated, then let out a sigh. It was so over the top that I almost laughed. She took up the folder and turned it open, and then she stopped breathing. Inside was everything. What is the evidence of her affair? Screenshots, transaction history, and AirTag data, hotel logs. Every falsehood she had uttered was documented, but it wasn't what made her turn pale. The legal paperwork broke her composure. A divorce petition filed on the grounds of adultery. What's the kicker? The prenup clause. Jessica's gaze flew across the page, reading the words, looking for an escape. But there wasn't one. Because when we married, she insisted on a prenup. She didn't have money because she imagined she would. She had big ambitions back then, but they never came to fruition. And she wanted to ensure her future prosperity. She did not read the infidelity clause at the time, the one who said she would lose everything if she cheated. No house, no funds, and no spousal support, nothing. Jessica clasped her fists over the papers. I could see her chest rising and falling faster now, her breathing erratic but steady. Still. She attempted to play it off. "This is ridiculous," she scoffed, dropping the folder to the table as if it were worthless. "You're not really serious?" I tilted my head. "Aren't I?" She scoffed again and turned on her heel. "God, Liam, you're so pathetic. You're having a tantrum because you can't keep your wife happy." I nearly laughed. She was desperate. I stood up carefully, stepping forward. "Jessica." She turned around, eyes flashing. "What?" I smirked. "Check your bank account." Her expression barely registered confusion before she took out her phone and unlocked it with nervous fingers. She tapped the banking app, waited a few seconds, then froze. I saw it the minute the realization dawned. Her lips opened slightly, and her entire body remained immobile. Her voice sounded quieter this time. "What have you done?" I shrugged. "You know that joint account where I deposit money every month?" Jessica did not respond. I smiled. "Yes, I drained it." She gasped. "You? My money?" "My pick," I said easily, and because I knew what was coming, I made sure to put every penny somewhere safe. "So go ahead, Jessica. Run towards Ethan. See whether he's willing to pay for your current lifestyle." Her face contorted with wrath. She came forward and pushed me hard in the chest. "You can't face the OSC asterisk. Asterisk will do this to me." I scarcely moved or reacted. Instead, I simply grinned down at her. I already did. Then, as if the cosmos had an impeccable sense of timing. Her phone vibrated. She flinched, looked down. A text from Ethan. I could see the preview from where I was standing. "Jessica, what the fuck else did you do? Your husband just arrived at my house. Do not ever contact me again." Her breath caught. I leaned in slightly and lowered my voice. "Oh, yes. I forgot to add that I had a little talk with your boy Toy this morning. It turns out he's not particularly interested in picking up your broken parts." Jessica's hands shook around her phone. Her eyes darted back and forth as if she was struggling to concentrate, trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. I stepped back and slipped my hands into my pockets. "Now, if you will excuse me, I need to speak with my lawyer." She blinked quickly. "Liam, please wait." I turned and walked away. I did not need to hear her reasons. She had made her decisions. Now she was going to live with them. Jessica was unraveling. I could hear it. Her hurried footsteps trailed behind me. The way she breathed my name, as if she could stop what was already in motion. "Liam," I did not wait. I took my jacket from the hook at the door, slipping it on in a steady, methodical motion. I wanted her to feel it, how peaceful I was, and how much control I possessed. Jessica, on the other hand, was in a downward spiral. "You cannot just walk away like this," she snapped, moving in front of the door and obstructing my path. Her hands shook around her phone as her chest rose and fell in rapid breaths. "We need to discuss this." I smiled. "We're talking." "No, you are talking." She shot back, her voice rising. "You came in here acting like a crazy, tossing papers at me, misusing my money, and went to Ethan's house." I cut in, lifting my finger. "So you know him?" Jessica froze for the first time since it all began. I saw it. Actual terror. Not just anger, not just an annoyance, real, genuine terror, because she had simply slipped up. Her mouth opened and closed. She took a small step back and shook her head. I did not mean." I stepped forward carefully. Jessica backed up immediately. "Do you want to know what I am, Jessica?" I spoke quietly. "Steady. I am done." She gulped hard. "Liam, please." I kept going, compelling her to step back inside her own house, which turned out to be a trap. "You disrespected me for 8 months." My tone remained consistent as I spoke. "Never rises. You lied. You sneaked about. Do you know what the funniest part is?" She struck the wall behind her. I leaned in just enough to show her how unaffected I was. "You aren't even good at it." Jessica breathed deeply, her lips forming a narrow, fierce line, her hands tightened into fists by her sides. "You're such a smug little Air Force," she was able to complete. Her phone vibrated again. She jumped, as if she had forgotten she still possessed it. Her gaze darted to the TV. Another message. I watched, amused, as she paused before carefully turning the phone away from me. I chuckled. "Go ahead and read it." Jessica breathed shakily and tapped the screen. Her eyes searched. Whatever message had just arrived, she froze. "I am not angry." Not in a panic. Now. This was horrifying. I raised an eyebrow. "Is there something wrong?" She did not respond. Instead, she took a deep breath and sprinted for the stairs. I watched her leave, still completely calm. I already knew what was going on. I had made certain of it. I listened as she dashed up to our bedroom. Her feet thudded on the floor, and she listened as drawers flew open while she rummaged through her belongings. Her breathing was fast and irregular. I handed her approximately 30s. Then I was positive she had found what I had done. I followed. I took my time, walking up the stairs slowly and deliberately. When I approached the doorway, I leaned against the frame, watching her feverishly open another drawer, a crazed look in her eyes as she searched for something. I asked casually. Jessica spun around so rapidly that she almost fell. "Where are they?" I smirked. "Where is what?" She looked at me, her chest heaving. "My credit cards, my passport, and my belongings. Liam, what have you done?" I sighed deeply and rubbed my chin. "Oh, those things." Her nostrils flared. "Liam," I smiled. "I got rid of them." Her whole body jerked. "What the hell do you mean? Did you get rid of them?" I shrugged. "Freeze the cards. I canceled the ones I could. I took the passport to ensure you don't get any brilliant notions about going away before we finalize our little divorce." Jessica lunged at me. I grabbed her wrist before she could shove me, twisting it just enough to throw her off balance. She gasped and tried to pull her hand away, but I didn't release go just yet. Instead, I leaned in so close that she could feel my breath on her skin. "I told you, Jessica, that my voice was gentle. Dangerous. I am done." Her breath was ragged. Now I can see it. She wanted to scratch, slap, and injure me in any way she could, but she didn't because she knew I had already won. I finally let grip of her wrist and stepped back. "Oh, and by the way," she flexed her fingers, still angry. "What?" I smirked. "Your job called while you were upstairs." Jessica blinked. "What?" I nodded. "Yeah, I had a very fascinating talk with HR this morning. Do you remember the corporate credit card you used to book those hotel rooms?" Her entire face had lost its color. I chuckled. "Yeah, it turns out that was fraud." Jessica's lips parted, but no sound emerged. I leaned against the doorway again, arms folded. You might want to check your emails. Jessica spun around and grabbed her laptop off the nightstand. She struggled with it, opening it with trembling hands, and her breathing became shallow as she scrolled through her email. Then she saw it. The termination notice is effective immediately. Jessica lurched back, the laptop dropping from her hands and onto the bed. She collapsed as she pushed both palms to her temples. No. She whispered. No. No. I pushed off the threshold, stretching as if I had all the time in the world. Anyway, I said, stepping towards the bedroom door. I have a meeting with my lawyer. You have joy figuring out your next step. Jessica did not move, did not look at me. She simply stood there, staring blankly at the TV. I'm watching her entire life fall in real time. I just walked away. When I returned that evening, the house was silent. No yelling or slamming doors. There was no Jessica standing at the front door to shout at me for ruining her life. Just a strange, unnatural silence. I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, took my time, and removed my jacket. I was half expecting her to storm down the stairs, but nothing happened. I went into the kitchen. The wine bottle sat on the counter, with a half-empty glass near it. The good wine number 2, the one she always saved for special occasions. A dry smirk tugged at my lips. Imagine having your entire existence destroyed in a single day. Considered special. Then, from upstairs, activity was slow and inconsistent. Like she was pacing, I took my time walking up my steps, heavy on purpose. I made sure she knew I was coming. If she wanted to throw a tantrum, she'd have to do it in front of me. I discovered her in the bedroom. She sat on the side of the bed, leaning over, elbows on her knees. She had changed from her typical form-fitting attire to an old hoodie, my hoodie from some years ago. It looked ludicrous on her because it was so big and baggy, but I didn't say anything about it. Her phone sat near her. The screen is dark. Her nails tapped on her knee. A fast and restless movement. When I leaned against the door frame, she eventually looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but not due to sobbing. No, Jessica was not the type of lady to cry when she lost. She sat. She was burning right now. You really did it, she remarked, her voice scratchy. I smiled. Yep. She inhaled sharply through her nose, her jaw tightening. You went too far, Liam. I gave a quiet chuckle. Do you think I went too far? I tilted my head. That is funny. I was just thinking about how you spent nearly a year deceiving another man behind my back. Jessica breathed and shook her head. This is not about that anymore. Oh, is not it? Her lips form a tiny line. Then she let forth a harsh, bitter laugh. You genuinely believe you have won, don't you? I grinned and folded my arms. Oh, yes, I have. Jessica leaned back gently, resting on her palms. You are an idiot. I raised an eyebrow. Am I? She smirked. Do you think this is the end? That I'll just give in and let you destroy me? I exhaled. Jessica, you have nothing left to ruin. She chuckled again and shook her head. However, there was something behind it. Something desperate. You think you're extremely brilliant, she muttered nearly to herself. I did not respond. I just watched her. Jessica chewed her lip before suddenly pushing herself up from the bed, standing straight and squaring her shoulders. Fine, she spoke, her voice sharp now. Do you desire war? You've got it. I grinned lazily. Oh, honey, we are way past that. Jessica breathed through her nose, her gaze locking upon mine. Then proceed slowly and deliberately. She took up the phone. I did not move, did not react. She scrolled for a second before turning the screen toward me. I might ruin you, she warned. I glanced at the screen. The text connected her to my supervisor. So, there was her play. I chuckled. Do you believe you can ruin me? Jessica's smirk spread. I know I could. A few communications, a couple of misunderstanding landings, and your entire career is gone. I gave a long, exaggerated sigh. God, Jessica, that is cute. She grimaced slightly. I took my phone from my pocket, swiped, tapped, and turned it toward her. Her smirk disappeared. It was a recording, our chat, every single syllable. Jessica's face had lost its color. What the hell? Oh, come on. I drew back and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Did you honestly think I wouldn't cover all my bases? Jessica merely stared at me silently. I grinned. So, go ahead. Text my boss. Make up any falsehood you want. But just know, the moment you make that little recording, it becomes public. Jessica breathed unevenly. Now! Her fingers squeezed around her phone, leaving her knuckles white. You bastard, she whispered. I laughed. Oh, honey, I learned from the greatest. For the first time since it began, I saw Jessica break, not just angry or scrambling, but realizing. She realized that no matter what she did or how hard she fought to get out of this, she was already buried. And I was the one who placed her there. Jessica stood perfectly motionless, her breathing short, and her fingers clenched so firmly around her phone that I nearly expected it to fracture. I watched and examined her. She was not only angry anymore, she was cornered, and she knew it. She slowly lowered the phone, staring at the floor as if she was racing through every potential escape route in her mind, hoping to discover something, anything, that could repair what I had done. I leaned against the doorframe and tilted my head. What's wrong, Jess? I inquired, my tone sarcastic. Has the cat got your tongue? Her head snapped up, and she began laughing, a frigid, piercing, somewhat maniacal chuckle. Do you think this is funny? She snarled as she stepped forward. Do you think this little game makes you a genius? I grinned. No, but it makes me the winner. Jessica's wild and urgent gaze locked on mine. You've wrecked me, Liam. I shrugged. No, sweetie, you've damaged yourself. I just made sure everybody saw it. She expelled a quick breath. Her hands shook, and her visage alternated between wrath and something worse. Panic. 8 years. She whispered abruptly. I grimaced slightly. What? Jessica's lips parted. Her chest rose and fell. Faster now. 8 years. Liam, that is how long we have been together. I did not respond. I just watched her. She moved closer. Do you really want to throw all of that away because of a mistake? I gave a full, real laugh. Jessica flinched. Her lips pressed into a narrow line. An error, I repeated, shaking my head. Jessica, it is a mistake to forget to pay a bill. It is a mistake to lose your keys. Cheating on your husband for 8 months is not wrong. She gulped hard. Liam, please. Oh, now you're pleading. I cut in. Where was this enthusiasm last night? You told me I was never enough. Jessica took in a short gasp, as if she had forgotten. She stated it as if she'd forgotten that words have repercussions. I did not mean, I smirked. Oh no, you meant it. Jessica clenched her jaw and flexed her fists at her sides, as if she wanted to smash something. Then she breathed shakily, and with that, her entire demeanor changed. The wrath vanished. Jessica's lips parted slightly, her eyes softened, and her voice lowered into a syrupy, sweet tone. Liam? I almost laughed again. There it is. The final trick in her book. She stepped forward slowly and deliberately. She reached out her fingers and delicately brushed over my forearm. We don't have to do this, she said, her voice calm and begging. This is something we can fix. I raised an eyebrow. Could we? She nodded and swallowed hard. Her eyes shone as if she were about to cry. I realize I made a mistake, Liam. I know I harmed you. But we can get through this. We can go to therapy. We can. I began laughing again. Jessica's face twisted. What? I shake my head. Stepping back, she allowed her hand to fall uselessly to her side. Do you truly think I will take you back? I scoffed. After everything. Her lips pressed together. Liam. Come on. I grinned and leaned in little. You're not sorry you cheated, I mumbled. You're just sorry you were caught. Jessica took a sharp inhale. Bullseye. She knew I was correct. She realized she wasn't apologizing. And now she realized I was over. I straightened and adjusted my jacket. I hope you liked your little power trip, Jess. I stated lightly because that's how it feels to lose. She tightened her teeth and shook her fist, but she had nothing left. She'd lost everything. I turned to leave. And then, Liam. I halted. Jessica's voice had changed again, lower, darker. I cast a glance back. She stood still, there is no begging, just watching me. And then she smirked. Good luck, she stated simply. You'll need it. I kept her eyes for a long time. Then I smiled. No, Jessica, you are. And then I walked away for the final time. The door closed behind me with a satisfying finality. No yelling, no last-minute pleas, and no dramatic chase down the corridor. Just silence. I stepped outside onto the driveway, and the cold nighttime air tasted odd. It felt lighter and cleaner, as if the weight of her had finally been taken from my chest. For 8 months, I had been inadvertently living in a house constructed on falsehoods, with a marriage that had died long before I discovered it. And now I was free. I got into my car, gripped the steering wheel, and let my fingers drum against the leather for a few seconds. My heart didn't race anymore, my mind was not spinning, I was not angry. I'd won. Jessica was finished. No work, no money, and no backup plan. And Ethan. He dropped her the moment he understood he wasn't her one, and only then did he discover she was also playing him. I let out a slow breath. Leaning back in my seat, I felt a smirk form on my lips. She had no one left, only an empty house full of memories. She would have to sit alone and reflect on how she had everything. A husband who adored her, a steady existence, and stability. She threw it away. For what? For a man who did not care enough to fight for her. I started the engine, and the dull hum filled the silence. I should have left straight immediately. But I stayed there for a minute longer, allowing the reality of it all to sink in. Then my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. A known number. To respond, I raised an eyebrow and swiped. Hello? Silence. Then a gentle, trembling breath. I smirked at Jessica. More silence. Then her voice grew quiet, nearly roaring. Have you ever loved me? I blinked. That wasn't the question I expected. Have I ever loved her? Of course I did it once. I loved her enough to start a life with her, to believe in and trust her. But now, I had no idea who she was anymore. I exhaled and shook my head slightly, then I responded. I did. Silence. So do you believe we could have? I ended the call. No more questions. No more what-ifs. She didn't deserve answers. She deserved her quiet. I put the car into reverse and backed out of the driveway for the final time. There'll be no looking back. Jessica represented my past, and I was done living there. Here's the next story. I arrived home early. That was my first error. The house was exceedingly silent. There's no TV, no music, and no Melissa sound. She hummed to herself while scrolling through her phone. Just silence. And something about the silence felt odd. I left my keys on the counter and strolled down the hall. Our bedroom's door was closed. Not unique. But I observed something I hadn't seen before. Her automobile keys are still on the foyer table. She never left them there. A shiver rushed down my spine, but I reminded myself not to be suspicious. Perhaps she was napping. Perhaps she was in the bathroom. Perhaps I pushed open the bedroom door. Melissa stood beside the dresser, half-dressed, yanking on a hoodie as if she had flung it over something, her face twisted in shock. Ethan, what are you doing at home? I was not looking at her. I looked at the bed. The sheets were a mess. Too much of a mess for someone who had merely sat around. One pillow lay on the floor with the distinct imprint of two people still pressed into the mattress. A shadow moved toward the balcony. That's when I noticed him. A man half-dressed, buttoning his shirt as he attempted to escape through the sliding door like a startled intruder. I can't even remember crossing the room. One moment I was standing in the doorway. The next thing I knew, my fist was knotted in his collar, pulling him back inside. Melissa yelled, "Ethan, stop!" The dude, tall, expensive suit, slicked back hair, and smirking like a third-rate movie villain. The smirk saved his life. Because if he had appeared terrified, begged, or acted like a man who understood he had done something wrong, I would have snapped his neck. Instead, I released go, allowing him to stumble back against the dresser. Melissa pushed herself between us, placing her hands on my chest. "Listen, I can explain. Explain." My voice did not sound like mine. "Melissa, what precisely are you trying to explain? The fact that this piece was in our bed or that you couldn't be bothered to conceal the evidence?" She flinched briefly, then squared her shoulders. "You have been distant," she shot back. "You are continuously working. You rarely touch me anymore. What was I supposed to do?" I laughed, really laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. "Right? So your answer was to spread your legs for another person?" Melissa's eyes darkened. Her lips are pressed together in a narrow line, and then she acted as if she had the right. If she was the victim in this situation, she rolled her eyes. That's when I realized this wasn't guilt. This was not a cause for shame. She wasn't apologizing. Not even a little. I glanced to the man who was still standing there, as if he owned the place. He fixed his cuffs as if it were any other day. I stared him in the eyes, really looked at him this time, and recognition flashed across my mind. I knew him. I'd seen his face before, and then everything connected. It struck me like a freight train. I didn't know this guy directly, but I had seen his face before in news articles, finance magazines, and pompous LinkedIn posts about winning at life. Nathan Carter, CEO, is affluent, connected, a man who might destroy lives with a single phone call. And he stood in my bedroom, smelling like my wife. Something cold and sharp moved up my spine, but I forced myself to be still. My hands tightened so tightly that my claws dug into my palms. Nathan smirked and adjusted his cuffs as if this were just a slight annoyance. "You should calm down," he replied, his voice smooth as silk. "There's no reason for things to become ugly." Ugh, ugly. I made a step forward, but Melissa pushed me back hard enough. "Ethan," she snapped, "simply quit being dramatic." I froze and stared at the woman I'd loved for 10 years, the woman I believed I knew. Dramatic. My voice was unusually calm. "You screwed another man in our bed, and I'm the one acting theatrical." Melissa folded her arms, her head tilted upward in disdain. "You don't get to play the victim here," she snapped back. "You left this marriage long before I did. That was it. I knew it wasn't a mistake. This was not a one-time error in judgment. She was selecting him right in front of me." Nathan exhaled, angry, and took out his wallet. A huge amount of cash passed between his fingers before he threw it at my feet. "Take it," he said. "Go somewhere to cool off. Get a drink. Be manly about it." I looked at the money and then back at him, and that's when something within me cracked. I moved forward, kicking the cash out of the path. My heartbeat was beating in my ears. The only way to sense. I said, "My voice, slow and steady, is with you and my wife, suffering the same pain you caused my daughter and me." Melissa paled. Nathan's sneer flickered briefly. He warned, "You do not want to make an enemy out of me." "Sit down. Shut up or I'll use my connections to crush you." I did not blink. Try it. For the first time, he appeared uncertain, and that's when I realized it wasn't over. Definitely not. Nathan didn't enjoy being challenged. I could see it in the way his jaw tensed and his hands contracted at the sides. Men like him were unused to being told no. Melissa must have noticed the change in the air because she grabbed my arm and dug her fingers into my flesh. "Ethan, please," she hissed. "You do not understand what you are doing." I pulled my arm away. "No, Melissa, you don't realize what you did." Nathan stepped forward, looming over me. He was taller and broader, and he presumably assumed that meant something, but I refused to back down. He may have all the wealth and power in the world. He was still a man standing in my house, wearing my wife's treachery like a second skin. "Here's what will happen." Nathan spoke softly, but with steel in his voice. "You are going to walk away. Forget this ever happened, and I will not ruin your life." I laughed and shook my head. "You think I am terrified of you?" Nathan smirked once more, but this time it did not reach his eyes. "You should be." Melissa rushed between us before I could answer, placing her hand against his chest. "Just go, Nathan," she whispered. "I will tackle this, handle it, as if I were a problem to be managed." Nathan observed me for a long time before exhaling through his nose. "Fine. But if he causes difficulty, he lets the threat linger before pressing a kiss on Melissa's forehead right in front of me. And that's when I almost lost it. But I did not. Not yet." Nathan fixed his tie, grabbed his coat, and walked away, leaving only the aroma of his cologne and the ruins of my marriage behind. I turned to Melissa, my heart pounding in my ears. "How long?" She sighed as if I'd exhausted her. "Does it matter how long?" I let out a growl. She rolled her eyes. Actually, she rolled her eyes. She finally admitted it had been 6 months, off and on. 6 months I worked late to support our family, while I excused her distant demeanor, while I told myself that the minor changes in her were not indicative of something worse. "Why?" I asked, and I despised the way my voice crackled. Melissa crossed her arms, her expression lifeless and indifferent. "Because I wanted to," she explained simply. "No remorse, no regrets. Just a woman who had already made her decision. And that's when I realized I wasn't speaking with my wife anymore. I stood there, staring at her as if she were a stranger who had just broken into my home. Because that is exactly how she felt, an intruder in my life." Melissa moaned heavily, stroking her temples as if I were the one causing her headache. "What would you like me to say, Ethan?" I took a slow breath and tried to keep my voice steady. "I want the truth," she scoffed. "Oh, you are now concerned about the truth. You stopped caring about me long ago. Unbelievable. You cheated on me. I dashed back into our house, to our bed. And now you're attempting to pin this on me?" She shrugged, like none of this mattered. "It's not all black and white, Ethan. I did not intend for this to happen." I let out a sour laugh. "Right. You just tripped and fell on him." Her face twisted with irritation. "You don't get it, Nathan." She paused for a half-second before catching herself. "He makes me feel alive, something you haven't done for a long time." I tightened my jaw so hard that my teeth ached. "So, what's your excuse? I did not make you feel lively enough. So you spread your legs for a billionaire?" Melissa curved her lips into a vicious smirk. "At least he understands how to respect a woman." Something inside of me cracked. Not in fury, but in clarity. I'd spent the last several minutes demanding explanations and attempting to comprehend why. But now I've seen the truth. She wasn't apologizing. She didn't care. She'd already moved on. I took a step back and exhaled softly. I want a divorce. Melissa did not even blink. She simply raised an eyebrow as if she had expected it. "Fine." Just like that? "Fine. No fight. There were no tears, nothing. Should have made things easy. Didn't." I turned to leave, but halted. "One final question," I said, my voice softer now. "Have you ever loved me for a brief second? Just a second. Her features flickered with something quite human. Then it was gone. She tilted her head, smirked, and remained silent. I walked away before she could. I did not go far. I got to the automobile. My hands shook as I grasped the steering wheel, breathing through the flames in my chest. Melissa's silence echoed in my thoughts repeatedly, like the final nail in the coffin. "Have you ever loved me?" Not one word. I could have driven away. You could have left her there, standing among the wreckage. She made something, but it was not directed at me, something larger than the treachery itself. Nathaniel Carter. This was not a random event. This was calculated, deliberate. Melissa did not only cheat, she selected one of the city's most powerful guys, and it was not adding up. I took out my phone. My fingers moved faster than my head could keep up. A short search revealed all I already knew about Nathan, the CEO of Carter Holdings, filthy affluent and scandal-proof. But then I scrolled down and discovered something that caused my blood to freeze. Nathan Carter was married. Married, with 2 children. I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. So it wasn't just about me. This was larger. I looked back at the home. Melissa was still indoors. She probably thought she had one. That I simply slink away. Heartbroken and discouraged, she continued to play home with her wealthy boyfriend. Not a chance. I was not going to walk away from this. Not yet. I climbed out of the car and went right back inside. Melissa barely looked up as I stormed into the living room. She sat on the couch, browsing through her phone as if she hadn't just destroyed our marriage. "How long have you known he's married?" I asked. She raised her eyes and sighed, as if she was fatigued by the discourse. "Ethan, does it matter?" I stepped closer. My heart is beating. It affects his wife. That caught her interest. Her lips parted slightly. A look of concern flashed across her face. "You never intended to leave me, did you?" I kept my voice quiet. "You were not looking for an escape. You were only playing." Melissa's face stiffened. "I do not owe you an explanation. You do. If you cheat on a married man and help him lie to his family," she tightened. But there it was again. The same awful sneer. I felt like an idiot for caring. I clenched my fist. I wonder what his wife thinks. That removed the smirk from her face. "You would not." She spoke slowly. I stared at her. Try me. For the first time. She was nervous, and I knew it wasn't over. Definitely not. Melissa stood up carefully. The phone remained in her grasp, and her knuckles were becoming white around the edges. She realized I wasn't lying. "You don't realize what you're doing, Ethan," she replied, her voice quiet and measured. I stepped closer. "No, I do not think you understand," I shot back. "Your little game is no longer just about us. Nathan has a family and children, and I'm guessing his wife has no idea what's been going on." Melissa's mouth tightened, but she managed a smirk. "Oh, please. Do you believe you'll be a hero? His wife is presumably already aware. Women like her have always known." I looked at her carefully. She was nervous but tried to disguise it. Perhaps I said, maybe not, but I'm guessing she doesn't have any proof that she was caught. Her gaze shifted downward for a moment, a crack in the armor. She knew I could burn the whole thing down. Melissa licked her lips, moved closer, and lowered her voice. "Ethan, listen to me. You do not want to do this." I scoffed. "Oh, you now care about what I want." She breathed sharply, peering out the window as if looking for something or someone. And that's when it struck me. She wasn't only worried I'd inform Nathan's wife. She was terrified Nathan would find out what I was about to tell. Suddenly, the entire picture transformed. Nathan wasn't just a rich playboy playing about with my wife. He was dangerous, the type of man who would not accept loose ends, the kind of man who disliked losing. I felt something called settle in my gut. Are you terrified of him? I said as realization dawned. Melissa's face stiffened immediately. I never said that. You did not have to. She swallowed and looked away briefly before returning her gaze to me. Just dump it, Ethan. Take the divorce. Move on. It's better that way. Better for whom? Her. Nathan. Tell the truth, Melissa, I said in a firm voice. Are you in trouble? She didn't respond. Did not even blink. And the silence told me everything. I took a hesitant step back, my mind racing. I was part of something bigger than an affair, something dark, something terrible. And for the first time since the beginning, I wasn't only angry. I was concerned, because if Melissa was afraid of Nathan Carter, maybe I should be too. Melissa's stillness stretched between us like a loaded gun. I could feel it in my gut. I had just stepped into something I was not meant to know about. She wasn't only terrified that I'd ruin Nathan's ideal little life, she was terrified of what might happen if I attempted. I inhaled gently, forcing myself to remain calm. What's he got on you? She crossed her arms. Drop it, Ethan. That was not a denial. I stepped forward. Has he threatened you? Melissa gave a bitter laugh. Do you truly think I am a helpless victim? I knew exactly what I was doing. However, there was something in her gaze. Something she was attempting to conceal beneath all that attitude. Fear. I could feel my pulse pounding through my body. I am tensing my mind. Opportunities are rushing by. Melissa, if you're in over your head, tell me right now. Her lips form a tiny line. You can't help me. That is all I needed to hear. I turned on my heel and stormed towards the door. I wasn't sure where I was heading, but I knew what I was going to do. Ethan, Melissa's voice echoed behind me. Do not be dumb. I ignored her. Stepping outside and taking out my phone, I scrolled till I found the number I wanted, hovering my thumb over the call button. Nathan Carter's wife, Julia Carter. I found her name in the publications I had looked up earlier, a charity head picture ideal socialite, and if I had to guess fully in the dark about her husband's nasty little secrets, I'd say, call. 1 ring, 2. Then a sharp, precise voice responded. Who is this? I opened my lips, but before I could say anything, a black SUV came to a stop at the curb. The doors swung open and 2 enormous men in suits walked out. My stomach sank. Nathan already knew that. I did not have time to react. The 2 men moved quickly. One grabbed my wrist and yanked the phone from my fingers while the other pushed me back toward the home. Hard. My spine struck the doorframe. Pain shot up my back, but I barely noticed it because Nathan Carter was stepping out of the SUV and Tom was constantly adjusting his cuffs as if this were just another business meeting. Melissa remained stuck at the doorway. Her face was pallid. Nathan came up to me, slow, deliberate. He looked at the phone his friend was now holding, then at me. His lips curved with amusement, calling my wife. I didn't respond. My jaw clenched so hard that my teeth ached. Nathan exhaled through his nostrils, then extended his hand. His buddy put my phone in it. Nathan moved the screen toward me. Carl remained linked. Julia Carter's voice sounded shrill and impatient. Hello? Who is this? Nathan smirked. Julia, sweetheart, it's me. Silence. Then her voice grew cold. Nathan, sorry for that. Incorrect number. He disconnected the call before she could react. Then I slipped my phone into his pocket as if it were his. Now. My fists curled. Give me my phone, Carter. Nathan tilted his head. Do you honestly believe you can make demands? I took a step forward, but his goons moved quickly. One grabbed my arm and twisted it just enough to cause a shooting ache up my shoulder. A foreshadowing of worse to come. Melissa finally spoke. Her voice shook. Nathan, don't! He looked at her, his sneer faltering for a moment. And that's when I noticed it. It wasn't just an affair for her. Melissa was afraid of him. Nathan turned back to me, his amusement gone. You should have gone away, Ethan. You've made things more complicated. I faked a grin even though my shoulder throbbed. What is wrong? Nathan, your lovely little life is going to fall. He grumbled and pulled out a large amount of cash from his jacket. He dangled it between two fingers before tossing it to my feet. Take the money. He spoke calmly yet firmly. Disappear, or I will make you disappear. Melissa flinched. I did not. I stared at him, the money, and the two men who were still holding me back. Then I smiled. Are you terrified of me? Nathan's jaw twitched. Just a second. And that's when I realized I had power in this. Perhaps not in strength, perhaps not in money, but in reality. I was not going anywhere. And Nathan Carter just noticed Nathan's grin had vanished. With a glimmer of delight, he took a slow step closer, his voice dipping low. Let me explain this to you, Ethan. His men still had their hands on me, but I wasn't fighting back. Not yet. This is what I wanted to hear. I wanted to test how far Nathan Carter believed he could push me before I pushed back. He adjusted his cufflinks, calm and controlled, except for his eyes. Pure calculation. I don't lose, he stated, not in business, not in my own life, especially not to a nobody like you. I exhaled slowly, pushing my hands to unclench. Nathan, why are you standing on my porch with your small security detail? Because you are winning. Something sharp came across his face, gone in a second. Melissa took a step nearer, laying her hand on his arm. Nathan, let's just go. He shook her off. Then, without unexpectedly, he grabbed my collar and pulled me close. His voice lowered to a whisper. You do not walk away from this, Ethan. You crawl. I smiled. I am not crawling anywhere, Carter. His grip tightened. I felt his breath on my face, his pricey cologne combined with the stink of pure ego. You believe you have leverage? He asked. Do you think Julia will listen to you? She will not. She never does. That struck me as fascinating. But before I could reply, Nathan nodded to his men. Pain erupted in my ribs, a sharp, devastating punch, fast, controlled, professional. I gasped, but I did not fall down. Not yet. Nathan leaned closer, his voice soft. This was a warning. The next time, it will not be. I forced myself to straighten, breathing through the heat on my side. You've done it. Nathan looked at me for a second. He smirked again, as if he'd already won. He turned to face Melissa. Say farewell to your hubby, dear. This is the final time you will see him. Then he walked away. His men were pursuing the SUV and the door slammed. The engine screamed into life. And with that, he was gone. Melissa exhaled shakily. Ethan, save it, I mumbled as I stepped back. My entire body ached, but my mind was racing. Nathan Carter had made a mistake. He assumed I was a nobody. He thought I had been defeated, but he had actually given me just what I needed. The second Nathan Carter's SUV vanished down the road. I turned to face Melissa. Are you coming with me? She blinked. What? Are you going to leave this house for the time being? Melissa actually laughed. But it was not amusing. It was disbelief. Ethan, I am not going anyplace with you. I made a hesitant step towards her. Do you think it's still about us? What about our marriage? I shake my head. Melissa, you don't understand it. That wasn't simply a threat. It was a promise. Nathan does not want any loose ends, and you and I are both at a loose end right now. Her face turned pale, yet her lips clenched. I can handle Nathan, I snapped. You cannot. If you could. He wouldn't have sent his men to rough me up as if I were a loose thread he wanted to sever. She hesitated, and that was sufficient. I grabbed my keys. Get inside the automobile. Melissa crossed her arms and shook her head. I am not leaving with you, Ethan. This is my life. You have no right to dominate me simply because you are furious because I cheated. I gave a sharp, bitter laugh. Upset? Melissa, I don't care about the affair anymore. You slept with the wrong man and are now in a situation you can't change. She parted her lips but said nothing. Listen to me. I spoke in a low, steady tone. Nathan Carter does not love you. He never did. You were a game for him, something fun to play with while his wife was not watching. But now you're a liability. Melissa swallowed. You're not aware of that. Yes, I do. I exhaled and wiped a palm down my face. I noticed the expression on his face when I mentioned Julia. He's afraid of her, Melissa. His wife is his weak point, and the second he suspects you will screw things up for him, he's going to eliminate the problem. I let it sink in. Her shoulders lifted and sank in rapid, weak gasps. I can defend you, I finally answered. But not if you stay here, for the first time since the horror began. Melissa seemed terrified. She stared at me intensely, and then slowly. She nodded. I did not squander time. I grabbed a bag, filled it with whatever I could find, and threw it into her arms. We're heading to a motel only for tonight. She did not argue. That terrified me more than anything. We got into the car, and I pulled out onto the road. My ribs ached. My head was throbbing. However, one thought persisted in my thoughts. Nathan Carter believed he had control. He assumed I was weak, but he was mistaken. He allowed me to go away. And now I was about to burn down his immaculate little world. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.